Hello and welcome to FPS Coach. My name is Rambo, and in this video, I'm going to share what the top CSGO pros are using for their DPI, effective DPI, and polling rate on their mouse, as well as their in-game sensitivity. But before we do, let's define these settings and how they affect our aim. DPI stands for dots per inch, or in gaming terms, pixels per inch, and is simply a measurement of how far the cursor moves on a monitor for every inch of mouse movement. So if you have a mouse that is set to 400 DPI, if you move that mouse 1 inch on the mouse pad, the crosshair will move 400 pixels on the screen. And if you have the DPI set to 800, then moving the mouse that same inch will move the crosshair 800 pixels on the screen. And if the DPI is set to 1600, then moving the mouse an inch will send the crosshair 1600 pixels across the screen. So basically, the lower the DPI you have, the less sensitive your mouse is. Or in other words, your crosshair will move less when you move your mouse, while the higher DPI will be more sensitive, thus moving your crosshair further when you move the mouse. Technically, there is no advantage between using any of the DPI numbers. However, going anything above like 3000 DPI is really excessive, and it's just too sensitive to control with any accuracy. I'll share in a few minutes the breakdown of what the pros are using in a few minutes. Another key mouse setting is the polling rate, which determines how fast the mouse is sending the movements to the computer, or how much the mouse is sending information to the computer, which is measured in hertz. Most gaming mice have the options to set the polling rate at 125, 250, 500, and 1000 Hz. If your polling rate is set to 125 Hz, that means the mouse is sending its signal to the computer 125 times per second, and a polling rate of 1000 Hz is sending signals at 1000 times per second. With 1000 Hz, the mouse tracking delay is only 1 millisecond, while 500 Hz is 2 milliseconds, 250 Hz is 4 milliseconds, and 125 Hz is 8 milliseconds. So basically, use 1000 Hz. The only reason I can think of why not to use 1000 Hz is if you already have amazing aim with 500 Hz, because there is a very small difference of feel from 1000 to 500 Hz. This is because at 500 Hz, the mouse sensor is sending movements to the computer at half the speed. There is a slight difference in that sensitivity. If you want to test which polling rate you are using, you can check out vsynctester.com, and the number next to ms or milliseconds is your polling hertz. I'll leave the link in the description box so you can test it yourself. Before we get into which settings the pros are using, we need to understand what an EDPI is. EDPI stands for effective dots per inch. Some call it true sensitivity, and EDPI is calculated by multiplying the mouse DPI with the in-game sensitivity. By combining the DPI and in-game sensitivity into effective DPI, it gives us an easier way to compare true sensitivity. It's basically a universal number where you can share with your friends, and it's easier to track this way. For example, if player A has DPI of 400 and an in-game sensitivity of 8, and player B has a DPI of 1600 and an in-game sensitivity of 2, and going by the effective dots per inch formula where you multiply the DPI and in-game sensitivity, both players A and B have the same EDPI or the same feeling, even though they have different sensitivity and mouse DPI. This research was gathered from prosettings.net from the top 350 CSGO professionals on September 8th, 2019. So out of the 350 pros, 295 of them use 1000 Hz polling rate, 50 of them use 500, and only 5 use 125. In terms of DPI, 237 of the pros use 400 DPI, 88 use 800 DPI, and only 20 use over 1000 DPI, and the other 10 used a random number between 400 and 800 DPI. For in-game sensitivity, the average sensitivity of the majority of the players, which is 237 of them which use 400 DPI, they use an in-game sensitivity average of 2.12 with an average effective DPI of 848. The total average effective DPI of all 350 pros is 882, I'm currently using 948 effective DPI in CSGO, so it's slightly above average. Let me know what you guys are using for your effective DPI and what your main game of choice is. Okay, so that does it for the video. Hopefully it was helpful in some way. If it was, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to stay up to date.